Have you ever woken up feeling like something inside of you is broken? Like your soul is tired, and there is just another day ahead of you, heavy, pressurized, without joy? Ancient Tibetan wisdom says that when a person gets stuck in the past, their energy runs out. But what if it's not just fatigue, but a sign that it's time to make a change? Today, we are going to talk about how to stop living in the expectation that everything will take care of itself, and what to do when it seems like there is no way out. After all, wisdom is not in tolerating, but in recognizing when it's time to choose. Helen awoke earlier than usual. The room was quiet, except for the clock on the wall lazily counting down the seconds. She turned her head and looked at the man lying next to her. George, her husband, the man she had lived with for nearly 50 years. His face had once been a beloved face, a face that evoked warm feelings, but now she was looking at features she seemed to know by heart, but she felt like she was looking at a stranger. Even his breathing seemed strange to her. She inhaled deeply and closed her eyes. Tiredness. Not the tiredness of a night's rest, but a heavy, oppressive fatigue that made her feel stiff inside. It had built up over the years. Since childhood she had been taught that a woman should be patient. Family is work, her mother had said. There will come a moment when you think you don't love anymore, but it's just fatigue. It'll pass. And she believed that the fights, the coldness, the resentments were only temporary, that everything will get better if you just wait. That her husband didn't say loving words because that's the way men are, that if he wasn't interested in her feelings, it wasn't because he didn't care, but because he had worries, work, fatigue. She put up with it. Year after year, decade after decade, she closed her eyes, told herself it was okay, justified it. She got used to it. But this morning she woke up with the clear realization that she couldn't take it anymore. She got out of bed and went to the window. Outside the window, the city was alive. People were hurrying to work. Someone was walking the dog. Children were pulling their parents' hands, asking to buy something at the nearest stall. Helen looked out and felt the emptiness growing inside her. Just a little more, and it would swallow her whole. She used to think it was only like that for others, that it was different in her family. They loved each other. They were happy. But when everything changed, when they became people living under the same roof, but so far away from each other, she tried to remember the moment when the coldness in their relationship had set in, but she couldn't. It hadn't happened suddenly. It had happened slowly, imperceptibly, like water that takes years to polish a stone. First, the long talks at bedtime disappeared, then the touching, then the laughter. Now they just lived side by side, but not together. She tried to talk to him, tried to explain that she was having a hard time, that she felt lonely even next to him. At first he brushed her off, then he got angry, and then he just stopped listening. And now, when the children are long grown up, when only old age is in front of her and the whole life is behind her, she asks herself, what if I was wrong? But to go? Where to? How? At her age, divorce isn't just a decision. It's a real catastrophe. It means giving up everything you've built up over the years. It means facing loneliness. But staying in that void was unbearable. She remembered looking at her grandmother when she was young. She lived with her husband, whom she hadn't loved for a long time. They spoke only of business. They ate at the same table in silence. They slept in separate rooms. And Helen had wondered why she didn't leave. Now she knew the answer, because she was afraid, because it seemed too late. But was it really late? She looked out at the city in the morning, and suddenly her thoughts became crystal clear. If things didn't change now, they never would. But how? Go? Stay? Stop waiting? Accept it? She didn't know. But she knew that if she did nothing, she would become a shadow of her former self. And from that moment on, her new life began. Not through divorce, not through scandal and recrimination, but through the realization that she had a right to herself, to her feelings, to her happiness. All day Helen felt strange, as if something inside her had shifted. Not pain, not anger, not even frustration, just a feeling that she had finally realized the truth she had been running from for years. George came home late as usual, undressed, ate dinner, and stared silently at the television. Helen sat across from him, watching him. How many years ago had she stopped seeing him as the man she had once been willing to do anything for? Once she had waited for his return, cooked dinner with care, asked questions, wondered how his day had been. Now it all seemed strange, distant, as if it were happening to someone else. She remembered how many years ago they had gone to the sea. They had been young and happy. It seemed to her that they had everything ahead of them. That night they walked along the beach. George talked about their plans, about the house they would build, how they would live. He had looked at her then with such warmth, such admiration. And now, the last time he'd looked at her like that, she sat in silence and suddenly caught a thought that really scared her. If George disappeared from her life tomorrow, would she feel anything? Pain? Fear? A sense of emptiness? Relief? The thought pierced her fingers and made her clench. Was this what marriage was supposed to be like? Just then, George looked up from the TV and asked indifferently, "Is something wrong?" She looked at him, at this man she had lived with for almost 50 years, and realized he hadn't noticed anything. Not her pain, not her emptiness, not her fatigue. He saw only his wife, a familiar element of his life, like a chair or a lamp. And then she did something she hadn't done in years. She told the truth. "I'm tired, George." He raised his eyebrows in surprise. Tired? Of what? How do I explain to him what has been building up for decades? How to tell him that the tiredness was not from the work, not from the worries, but from himself? She was silent, and he waited a few seconds for an answer. Then he shrugged. "So rest," he said, turning his attention back to the TV. And that was it. Eleanor felt everything boiling inside her, everything that she had been suppressing for so long, that she had been hiding deep inside, suddenly burst out. "Do you even realize what I'm saying? I'm not saying I need to go to bed early or go to a sanatorium. I'm tired of being nothing to you. You can't see me. You don't hear me. You don't even notice that something is wrong with me." She raised her voice, for the first time in decades. George froze. He looked at her with puzzlement, with incomprehension, even mild irritation. "What are you starting?" he muttered with a sigh. "It's normal, isn't it?" Normal. The word hit her like a heavy stone. She nodded slowly and got up from the table. "Yes, you're right. Everything is normal." But inside she was already abnormal. Nothing would change from this evening on. The next day, Helen awoke with a clear sense that her life was now divided into before and after. Yesterday's conversation with her husband had broken something inside her, but at the same time it had given her a strange sense of freedom. She wouldn't take it anymore. But what now? George acted as if nothing had happened. He got up, had breakfast, put on his old grey sweater as usual, and went about his business without even asking how she was feeling. He didn't care, and she didn't either. She sat at the kitchen table for a long time, staring at her cup of tea. For the first time in years, her thoughts weren't about him. She was thinking about herself. When was the last time she did something for herself? Not for the house, not for the children, not for George, but for herself. She couldn't remember. Once upon a time she had loved to read. Romance, adventure, books that made her heart beat faster. But for how many years had her shelf been empty? She had once dreamed of visiting Italy, of seeing the Colosseum, of tasting real Roman coffee. But the dream remained a dream. She always put it off, always told herself, later. But now she suddenly realized the terrible truth. Then didn't exist. She looked in the mirror. Her face seemed tired, her eyes empty. She had lived so long to please others that she had simply forgotten herself. But if divorce wasn't an option, was there another way to live? Was it possible to find peace without destroying the life she was used to? Helen got up and walked over to the closet. There, in the back corner, was a dress. It was beautiful, dark blue, with a slight sheen that accentuated her figure. She'd bought it a long time ago, hoping to wear it on a special occasion, but the special occasion never came. She gingerly ran her hand over the fabric and suddenly thought, why not today? She put on the dress, fixed her hair, took her old earrings out of the box, looked at herself in the mirror, and felt alive for the first time in her, not waiting for him to pay more attention. She wasn't waiting for him to change. She would live for herself, and if one day he realized that he was losing, well, that would be his problem. The next day, Helen felt different. She felt a lightness she hadn't felt in years. It was as if the invisible weight that had been on her shoulders all this time had disappeared. George didn't ask a single question. Didn't ask why she had changed so suddenly. Didn't ask how she felt. He just watched, and it annoyed him. That evening he said casually, "You're acting strange." Helen looked at him and smiled for the first time in a long time. "Strange? I just remembered I have me." He frowned as if he didn't understand. Everything was still the same for him. A woman should be a woman. Home, dinner, the usual routine. But something had changed, and he could feel it. Helen lived differently now. She didn't ask him questions he ignored anyway. Didn't try to make herself comfortable. Wasn't fitting in. The next day she went to the park, just to get some air. She went to a cafe and allowed herself to order dessert. When was the last time she had eaten for pleasure? She struck up a conversation with the woman at the next table and found her conversation partner surprisingly interesting. And you know what the strangest thing was? She enjoyed it without George, without that oppressive feeling that life had long since lost its color. That night she came home later than usual, and for the first time in years he asked her,